Welcome to Bring the Best of the Web to your native apps with WebView2. My name is Liman. I'm a program manager working on the Microsoft Edge WebView2 team. You can call me a huge compiler nerd. In the past, I've worked on projects like the Checker Core JavaScript engine, on engine hosting, performance, diagnostics, cross-platform, WebAssembly, all that type of fun stuff. And over the years, I've taken a huge interest in the TypeScript project and spent some time with the crew. And for the last year, I've been working on this new WebView2 project, which I really love. So for me, the consistent theme is I really love working with technologies, and especially web technologies, and I love working with developers. So look at our agenda today. You will learn about what type of problems WebView2 can solve for your native application. We'll look at Outlook together and see how they're using WebView2 to maximize their productivity. And we'll examine WebView2 in the lens of UI frameworks, get you started in just 10 minutes, and take a look at our roadmap. So this should be fairly relatable to a lot of the developers out there. When you build an application, you often have to pick a stack. You can either go with the web, which is all about reach. It is ubiquitous. You write the same code and it runs everywhere, which is the number one reason why developers go with web technologies. On the other hand, you have the native platform, which is more powerful. You have access to more capabilities, such as file system access, your own DRMs, advanced windowing, just to give some examples. And you get to speak the native UI design language, which sometimes gives you a better user experience than its web counterparts. So to think about web or native, it is really a tough choice because developers nowadays often have to build very powerful application and sometimes native looking application that runs on a multitude of platforms. So a pure web approach or a pure native approach just doesn't always meet our business needs anymore. And at times like this, developers turn their eye to a hybrid approach, a mixture of web and native, if you will, by using technologies such as WebView and Electron, which actually give you benefits of both web and native. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we talk about WebView2 specifically, let's talk about WebView as a general concept. For building hybrid applications, WebView is an essential component that is available on most operating systems and platforms. It allows developers to embed web content, so JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all that fun stuff, in their native applications. WebView can be used in pretty much any scenario where having a web stack just makes sense. You can use WebView for a portion of your app UI, say a sidebar for the extensibility model, or an ad segment at the bottom. So essentially, you can have a hybrid of web and native UI in your application. On the other side, you can also have a single web view for the entirety of your application, such as an app portal to host all of your web-based LOB apps. And both approaches are fairly common, as we've seen. Like we mentioned before, using WebView does get you benefits of both web and native. Because you're authoring JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, your code is very shareable across a multitude of platforms. Generally speaking, web development and deployment is also faster than native. And you get access to the mass web ecosystem with all the libraries, frameworks, and tools. For example, we've heard a lot of developers wanting to use TypeScript or libraries like Lodash and whatnot. And you get to leverage your web programming skill set and hire from a very large talent pool. So even if you're building application for just a single platform, the web approach still offers a considerable amount of benefits. And in addition to that, WebView also have access to native capabilities depending on what the hosting application allows. So you are 100% in total control. And last but not least, WebView can be a part of your application rather than a full web-based framework like Electron. This allows you to not have to rewrite your entire application, maintain the native look and feel, and protect your existing native IPs. When we look at WebView on Windows, there are a couple of in production options available today. We have the web browser control, which is based on IE and it is supported across all Windows versions. While developers do get benefits from the compatibility aspect, other developers simply want to move on to a modern platform to use HTML5 and the latest JavaScript standards. On the other side, we have the Edge HTML WebView control, which is a bit more modern, but it is only available on Windows 10. And especially the Win32 version is only available after the fall 2018 Windows 10 update. Because Edge HTML is also tied to the operating system, you get to a different version of the WebView on a different version of the OS, which isn't really ideal for developers. Here, we talk to developers almost on a daily basis. And more often than not, we hear developers talking about they're just stuck on the web browser control for a really long time. They want to move on, but they're unable to. So it is really loud and clear to us that developers want a modern WebView control that is available and consistent across all Windows versions. When the browser moved from Edge HTML to Chromium, we get a chance to make a new WebView for our developers, and we call it the WebView2 project. WebView2 is based on the modern Microsoft Edge Chromium engine. It is available and consistent across all supported Windows version, even including Windows 7, just like what our developers has asked. Also, it is available for both Win32 and UWP application, so you don't have to worry about the app type. The web platform by default is also always up to date. It means and sometimes we like to call it evergreen. It means you get the latest and greatest platform features while also always staying secure. To stay compatible with the platform changes, you can develop and test against non-stable channels ahead of time. So when these changes do flow into the stable ones where your end users are, your application can be ready and stay compatible. And this is a workflow that is essentially familiar to almost all web developers and aligning with the model you follow with your website and the browsers. But when we talk to developers, we do recognize that there are going to be scenarios where the developer just does not want to keep up with the speed of the web platform update. They're optimizing for really maximum app compat because of their environment constraint, and they want to be in control of the update cadence. So for these developers, we have a secondary mode we call the fixed version WebView2, or the bring your own WebView2 as we used to call it. The idea is developers can package, ship, and update the WebView2 binaries along with your application. So you're essentially trading the automatic update and servicing and the very lean disk footprint for very strict app compat and control on cadence. Now that we understand WebView2 a little bit, let's look at a real example and really contextualize everything we've talked about. Outlook, as many of you know, have a desktop client and a Outlook web app, or OA, among a handful of things. Because they support a multitude of platforms, including a website, sometimes they have to build multiple implementation for the same feature, which not only take time to build, but also is quite painful to maintain, to say the least. Because the native development can also be expensive sometimes, this also isn't great. And usually it would take them a really long time for any updates for their native client, for their desktop client to reach their end users, which resulted in the desktop client just having a few features lagging behind the web counterpart. So the situation obviously isn't ideal, and this is by no means a unique problem to Outlook by any stretch. But Outlook is very motivated to improve the situation, and they eventually settled on web technologies as the right call because of their code sharing and development needs. So when we first started the WebView2 project, Outlook is very excited because with WebView2, they can actually reuse the web app's components to modernize their desktop experience. There are a handful of targeted scenarios, but let's look at the Room Finder as an example to see how WebView2 is helping Outlook. So on my screen, on the left-hand side, I have the Outlook web app with the Room Finder. It looks fairly nice, and as far as I know, the experience has been there for a little bit of time. On the right-hand side, I have the desktop client, and the in production version today has an older version of the Room Finder experience. But we're looking at an internal and a release build. So if I click on the Room Finder icon right here, it will actually open a WebView2 window hosting the web version of Room Finder inside. As you can see, the experience for the Room Finder on two very different platforms are actually fairly consistent, and they're really running the same code besides a small number of differences to really help them blend in into their environment. The integration is also done very seamlessly, and you wouldn't feel like the Room Finder is out of place in the desktop client or anything like that. If you click on one of the rooms, it will also show up in native. That's because WebView can actually talk to the native application, and you can have interaction between the web components and the native components. And the same WebView2 hosting workflow does not only work for the Room Finder, but is also easily replicable for any Outlook components out there. So with WebView2, Outlook is getting a lot of value. First, Outlook can maximize its productivity by just getting rid of a whole bunch of legacy code and really focus on a single code base for their components going forward. Second, this drastically improved their update cycle, changing from a lengthy client-side deployment model to a server push if they wish to do so. And last but not least, Outlook is able to make incremental changes to modernize their desktop experience instead of using Electron or a full web view and having to wait for a long time for that full makeover to finish. So we're able to get a lot of value from WebView2 just for Outlook. Now you're probably wondering, can I host WebView2 in my Windows application? And the answer is yes. You can host WebView2 inside of a Win32 C and C++ application in WPF and WinForms and in WinUI 3.0. At Build last year, we previewed the Win32 C and C++ control with Office add-in as an example. Although the control is still under preview, we've made a lot of progress and had 9 SDK releases with important features such as native object injection that allows JavaScript to access the native object. We also have the Win7 support, ARM64, and VS and VS Code debugging. Along the journey, we've been working very closely with the developer community and ISVs. To date, I think we have about 170 issues open on our GitHub feedback repo and a lot of other feedback from other developer channels as well. I want to take the opportunity here to really thank our developer community. It is just such an awesome experience working with such an enthusiastic crowd. It is really your feedback that is guiding us building the right product. And a lot of our release features are actually direct outcome from working with developers like you. For example, the Win7 support and native object injection that we just talked about. And for something more recent, we added a window close request event after discussing with a developer on GitHub about letting the host application handle the web content, closing WebView with window.close and something like that. So if you have something you want to see in WebView2, definitely give us a shout out at the WebView2 feedback repo and tell us what you think. Interestingly, one of the overwhelming feedback we've got during our Win32 C and C++ preview phase is, hey, you folks really need to make a .NET control. And I'm very happy to share that the WebView2 for WinForms and WPF is under preview right now. It supports both .NET Framework and .NET Core, and it will support .NET 5 in the not too distant future. So let's do some live coding and get you started on WebView2 on WPF. If you're a WinForms developer, don't worry, the same workflow also applies to you, so you will learn something from this demo as well. Before we really dive in, make sure you have the prerequisites installed. That is VS 2015 Plus with .NET support enabled, and we also recommend installing the Microsoft Edge Canary channel. Other channels can also work, provided that the minimum build number for a given SDK is met, but we really recommend Canary because during our preview phase, we would love to get our features to developers at the earliest possible opportunity. So oftentimes, a new SDK will only work with Canary, and the other channels will gradually catch on after a week or depending on what channel it is. So let's say we have the prerequisites installed. Let's create a new project. Let's do WPF with .NET Framework. And again, if you're doing .NET Core or if you're doing WinForms, don't worry, the same workflow applies to you as well. So let's create a new project. And here we go. So the first thing you want to do is to get the WebView2 SDK, which is a NuGet package. We can go to right-click, manage NuGet package, and we can search for Microsoft.web.WebView2. Make sure the include pre-release box is checked because the .NET support is only available in the pre-release package. Let's select the package and install the latest pre-release package. Once we have the SDK, let's go back to main window.xaml and add the XAML namespace for WebView2. So here, into XAML namespace, WebView2 equals CLR namespace and Microsoft.web.webview2.wpf. Thank you very much, autocomplete. And let's go to the grid. Let's say we want to build a TypeScript learning application reusing the TypeScript website. So what we can do is create a WebView2 element that navigates to the TypeScript website. Or let's give it a name, call it WebView2 window, And let's give it a source, which is the starting location of your WebView app, of your WebView2. So HTTPS script lane.org. Not only can you go to a web location, we also support local resources. If you want to package all of the local resources with the application and navigate to those places with a FAR URI, this is 100% supported. And beside the source, you can also navigate to any location at a later point programmatically with our navigation APIs. So with that, let's build our project and launch it. And as you can see, here's our first WebView2 application navigating to TypeScript website. We can learn about TypeScript by looking at the documentation, or we can hang out in the playground and just do some experiments over there. So this is all cool and fun. And this is pretty much I would say, a hello world type of scenario. Now let's do something a bit more interesting. Let's say, because this is a TypeScript learning app, we do not want our end users to leave the TypeScript domain, because again, it is a TypeScript application. We can use the navigation starting event, which is fired when WebView2 is about to navigate to a location. So we can go to mainwindow.xaml.cs, and let's type in the namespace using Microsoft web.webview2.core, so that we don't have to type in this thing again. And let's add a callback function for our navigation starting event. Let's call it restrict domain. It takes a sender object and takes some event args. With the event args, we're able to get the URI that the WebView is about to go to. If the URI doesn't start with typescriptline.org, we will just cancel the navigation and use the execute script async API to tell the users, hey, the URI is outside of the TypeScript domain. You cannot go there. And be sure to register your event handler as well. Otherwise, it won't be caught, obviously. And as you can see before, the Visual Studio tooling that you would expect, for example, the autocomplete, also the go to definition, also works. So it's really good for your productivity. With that, let's launch our application again. And this time, I am an end user trying to escape this application. I can go to the Connect tab and try to go to Discord. And WebView will just tell me, hey, Discord is outside of the TypeScript domain. You can't go there. Stop. And one last thing I want to call out here is you can also use the browser dev tools to debug your application. So right-click, hit inspect. You will see the familiar dev tools at your disposal. And don't worry, you can also turn off the dev tools so that your end users doesn't have access to them and poke around in your source code. Besides .NET, WebView2 is also available in WinUI 3.0 Preview 1 that will just announce a build. From the developers interacting with WinUI Alpha, we've gotten a lot of feedback that they really want to access the core WebView2 object to get to the underlying functionalities, such as the execute script async API that we just saw in the .NET demo. And I want to share that feedback taken, and the development for the core WebView2 wrapper is on its way. Now we've established that the WebView2 preview for Win32 C and C++, WPF and WinForms, and WinUI 3.0 are all in the preview. We're working towards release a stable version at Q4 2020, although the different UI frameworks wouldn't necessarily release at exactly the same time. While this is the best estimate that we've currently got based on our backlog, I do want to emphasize that our principle is great before date. So we'll only release the stable version when we feel like the quality and stability is there for our developers. And we've covered Windows. Besides Windows, we're also getting interesting customer signals from developers about WebView2 on other platforms such as macOS or Linux. Although WebView2 on other platforms is likely going to be a long-term project for us, we would really love to hear your scenario and feedback so that we can build a great WebView2 on the right platforms. So some quick takeaways for today. You can use the Microsoft Edge Chromium-based WebView2 to get the best of web and native. The control is available and consistent on all Windows versions and is available for Win32 C and C++, WPF and WinForms, and WinUI 3.0 applications. The web platform is by default always up to date, or we have a fixed version that will help for maximized app compat with some trade-offs. If you want to learn more about WebView2, you can go to aka.ms/WebView2 to look at our documentation and get started. The demo that we just showed also has a slightly different and more comprehensive version in our documentation. Be sure to share your feedback with us and follow the MS Edge Dev and myself on Twitter to stay tuned about Edge developer news. If you're interested in some related content, here is a list of great talks that you can also attend to learn more about what's up with WinUI, with .NET, and other Microsoft Edge platform changes and upcoming news. And with that, thank you very much for tuning in and stay safe.